What if that nagging feeling in the back of your neck was real? What if those hands reaching out from the dark that you believed were there? What if the monster in the basement really existed? And what if there was really something under the bed? Would you have the courage to face your fears?
The radio crackled with static as I adjusted my night vision goggles. Something wasn't right in the village below. My team had been tracking insurgent movements in this remote part of Afghanistan for the past week, but tonight was different. The usual patterns of life were completely absent. Sierra 2, this is Sierra 1, I whispered into my comm. Marcus, do you have eyes on the target building? Nothing but static answered me. Sierra 2, radio check, over. More static. The moon cast long shadows across the mud brick buildings, and a hot wind carried the smell of something metallic, like copper pennies left in the sun. Blood. My training kicked in as I switched channels. Base, this is Sierra 1. We've lost contact with Sierra 2. Requesting status update on other teams in the AO. The response came broken and distorted. Ra 1, multiple, reports, medical, evacuation, bite wounds. Bite wounds. That didn't make any sense. I crawled to the edge of my observation post, scanning the village through my scope. Movement caught my eye, a figure stumbling out of a doorway. Even with the green tint of night vision, something was obviously wrong with their gait. Their head hung at an unnatural angle. More figures emerged from the shadows. They moved wrong. All of them moved wrong. A scream pierced the night. Close. Too close. I swung my rifle toward the sound and felt my blood run cold. Less than 50 meters away, I saw Marcus. He was on his back, fighting off what looked like one of the village elders we'd met with yesterday. But the elder's movements were feral, animalistic. He had Marcus pinned, teeth tearing into my teammate's throat. I didn't hesitate. 2 shots, center mass. The elder jerked but didn't stop. Marcus's struggles were getting weaker. I adjusted my aim and fired once more. The elder's head exploded in a spray of gore, and he finally collapsed. Marcus! I broke position and ran to him, but I already knew. He was gone. His eyes stared sightlessly at the stars, blood pooling beneath him in the Afghan dust. My radio erupted with chatter, panicked voices from multiple units reporting similar attacks. Through the chaos, I caught fragments that chilled me to my core. They don't stay down. Headshots only. Overrun. Fall back. The village below was coming alive with movement now. Dozens of figures, all moving with that same wrong gait, drawn by the sound of my gunfire. I checked my magazine. 28 rounds left. 2 more mags on my vest. My mind raced through options, each worse than the last. That's when Marcus's hand twitched. His head turned, neck bent at an impossible angle, and his eyes, now milky white, locked onto mine. My best friend's face contorted into a snarl, teeth snapping as he lunged for my leg. I jumped back, raising my rifle. "I'm sorry, brother," I whispered, and pulled the trigger. As Marcus's body slumped back to the ground, I knew with crushing certainty that the world had changed forever. I had 12 hours until sunrise, limited ammunition, and no idea if there was anyone left alive to extract us. The horde from the village was getting closer. I slung my rifle, grabbed Marcus's spare magazines, and started running toward the hills. The mission was no longer about gathering intelligence or tracking insurgents. There was only one mission now: survive. Behind me, the dead rose in the moonlight, and their hungry moans echoed across the valley. The night was just beginning. The terrain worked in my favor as I moved through the mountains. Years of training had taught me how to use the landscape to my advantage. But these things, these walking corpses, didn't care about cover or concealment. They just kept coming, relentless in their pursuit of anything living. 2 hours into my escape, I caught a brief transmission through the static. Fall back to Firebase Echo. All surviving personnel. Defensive positions established. Firebase Echo. It was about 4 clicks east of my position, and if anyone had a chance of holding out against this nightmare, it would be there. The base had walls, ammunition, and hopefully answers about what the hell was happening. I kept to the high ground, using my night vision to spot the hordes before they could spot me. The infection seemed to spread fastest in populated areas. Every village I passed was overrun. The dead came in waves, some fresh, others already decaying in the Afghan heat. I tried not to think about how many of them were civilians I'd spoken to just days ago. The radio transmissions grew more frequent as I got closer to Echo, but they weren't encouraging. Medical bay compromised. Burn the bodies. They're inside the wire. I reached the ridge overlooking the firebase, and my heart sank. The main gate was wide open, vehicles scattered across the entrance like discarded toys. Gunfire erupted sporadically from different positions, but it was uncoordinated, desperate. The base was being overrun from the inside. Movement on the command center's roof caught my eye. Someone was still alive up there, holding off the dead with well-placed shots. I counted 5 bodies drop before the shooter's rifle went quiet, probably reloading. Making a decision, I shouldered my rifle and began my approach. The shooter spotted me, and I saw them raise their weapon in my direction. I quickly flashed the infrared strobe on my gear, our signal for friendly forces. "Jack?" A familiar voice called out. "Jack, is that you?" Sarah. I couldn't believe it. Sarah was our combat medic, and one of the toughest soldiers I knew. "What's the situation?" "Bad," she replied, dropping a rope ladder. "Real bad. Get up here before they spot you." I scrambled up as Sarah covered me. The rooftop had been converted into a hasty fighting position, with ammunition crates and water bottles scattered around a satellite communication setup. 3 other survivors were there. Chen, our communications specialist, who was nursing a badly bandaged arm. Rodriguez, a young Marine who looked shell-shocked. And Wilson, an Air Force pararescue jumper who was unconscious and burning with fever. "Wilson got bit trying to evacuate the medical bay," Sarah explained, her voice tight. "He's not going to make it. We've seen how this plays out." I looked at the base below. The Walking Dead had completely overrun the northern section, and fires were spreading through the barracks. Most of the zombies wore military uniforms. Our own people turned against us. "We've got maybe an hour before they break through the lower levels and reach us," Sarah continued. "Chen's been trying to reach command, but all we're getting is reports of similar outbreaks worldwide. This isn't isolated, Jack. It's everywhere." Rodriguez spoke up, his voice barely a whisper. "The choppers. In the motor pool. If we can reach them." I studied the distance between our position and the helicopter pad. It was about 200 meters of zombie-infested ground, but it was our only shot at survival. We had limited ammunition, no food, and Wilson's condition was deteriorating rapidly. A sound behind us made us all spin around. Wilson had stopped breathing. As we watched, his fingers began to twitch. "I'll do it," Sarah said quietly, raising her sidearm. He was my patient. The gunshot echoed across the base, drawing more of the dead toward our position. Dawn was still hours away, but we were out of time. We had to move now. I checked my remaining ammunition. 2 magazines plus half a dozen loose rounds. Okay, listen up. We've got one shot at this. Chen, can you still shoot with that arm? He nodded grimly, hefting his rifle. Then here's the plan. The plan was simple, which meant 1,000 things could go wrong. We'd use the remaining thermite grenades from the rooftop arsenal to create a diversion on the east side of the base. While the dead were drawn to the explosions and flames, we'd make our run to the helicopters. Remember, I whispered as we made our final preparations. Tight formation, conserve ammo, headshots only. Rodriguez, you take point since you know the shortest route through the motor pool. Sarah, you're our 6th. Chen, stay between us. We need you alive to fly that chopper. Chen managed a weak smile despite his injured arm. Those flying lessons better pay off, right? The thermite grenades created a hellish display when they ignited, casting long shadows across the base. The dead moved toward the flames like moths, their moans rising in a terrible chorus. It was now or never. Move! We descended the rope ladder in quick succession, my heart pounding as my boots hit the ground. Rodriguez led us through a narrow alley between the armory and the mess hall, his weapon up but mercifully silent. The first 30 meters went exactly as planned. Then Rodriguez froze. Oh God, he whispered. The mess hall doors had burst open, disgorging a wave of infected. They'd been trapped inside, and the sound of our movement had drawn them out. Among them was the base commander, his stars still visible on his gore-stained uniform. Back, I hissed, but it was too late. They'd seen us. The air filled with the sound of suppressed weapons fire as we engaged. Each shot found its mark. We were all too well trained to miss at this range, but there were so many of them. Too many. Rodriguez's rifle clicked empty. In the second it took him to reach for a fresh magazine, one of the infected lunged. I saw teeth sink into his neck, saw the spray of arterial blood. No! Sarah screamed, emptying her magazine into the crowd of walking dead. Rodriguez fell, his hands clutching his throat, eyes wide with terror. We have to move. I grabbed Sarah's vest, yanking her backward. He's gone! Move. We ran. There was no other choice. The gunfire had drawn more of them, and now the entire base seemed to be converging on our position. Chen was starting to lag, his injured arm clearly causing him more pain than he'd let on. The helicopter pad was in sight, but so was the horde of infected blocking our path. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds. The diversion had drawn some away, but not enough. Jack, Chen gasped. I can't. My arm. Sarah fired her last rounds, dropping 3 more infected. I'm out. I made a decision. Reaching into my vest, I pulled out my last thermite grenade. When this goes off, run straight for the Black Hawk. Don't stop. Don't look back. Don't wait for me. Jack, no, Sarah started. That's an order. I pulled the pin. On my mark. The infected were closing in from all sides now. I could see their faces, people I'd known, worked with, fought beside. Now they were nothing but hungry dead things. Mark! I hurled the grenade into the thickest concentration of zombies and charged forward, firing my rifle from the hip. The thermite ignited with a blinding flash, and the night air filled with inhuman screams as the dead began to burn. Sarah and Chen ran through the gap I'd created, making straight for the helicopter. I kept firing, drawing as many of the dead toward me as I could. My magazine ran dry. I dropped the rifle and drew my sidearm. The rotor blades began to turn. Chen had made it to the cockpit. Sarah was providing covering fire with a weapon she must have found in the helicopter. More infected were coming. Always more. My pistol clicked empty. Jack! Sarah's voice carried over the sound of the rotors. Jump! The Black Hawk was lifting off, hovering just a few feet above the ground. 20 meters away. Might as well have been a mile. I ran. Time slowed to a crawl as I sprinted toward the hovering Black Hawk. The dead were everywhere, their grasping hands inches from my back. The helicopter swayed as Chen fought to keep it steady, his injured arm likely screaming in protest. Sarah hung from the crew door, one hand gripping the frame, the other extended toward me. Come on. I could feel hot breath on my neck. The stench of decay filled my lungs. My legs burned with fatigue. Just a few more steps. I jumped. My fingers brushed Sarah's hand, failed to grasp it. For one horrible moment, I was suspended in space, neither on the ground nor in the aircraft. Then Sarah lunged forward, grabbed my tactical vest, and pulled. I slammed into the side of the Black Hawk as dead hands clutched at my boots. Sarah fired her recovered weapon one-handed, the muzzle flash lighting up twisted faces below. I kicked hard, felt something tear, and then I was inside. Go! 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 Sarah screamed. The helicopter lurched upward, nearly throwing me back out the door. I scrambled to my feet and grabbed the mounted gun, spraying the rooftop to clear our escape path. The base below was a vision of hell. Fires burning everywhere, dead things shambling through the flames, and here and there, the brief muzzle flashes of other survivors fighting their last stands. We need to help them, Sarah shouted over the rotor wash. We can't. My words tasted like ash. We barely got out ourselves. We don't have enough fuel or ammunition to... A massive explosion cut me off as the ammunition depot detonated. The shockwave rocked our helicopter, and Chen swore as he fought to maintain control. The blast had taken out a large section of the base wall, and through the gap, I could see more infected pouring in from the surrounding countryside. The base was lost. Jack, Chen called from the cockpit. We've got incoming. I turned to see 2 Apache attack helicopters approaching fast. The lead aircraft waggled its wings. A greeting. A familiar voice crackled over the radio. Sierra 1, this is Archangel Flight. Good to see you made it out. Pete. I recognized the Apache pilot's voice. What's the situation? Bad, brother. Real bad. We've got reports of outbreaks in every major city worldwide. Military's gone dark. Civilian infrastructure's collapsing. We're headed to the fallback point in the mountains. Supposedly there's a hardened facility there. You're welcome to join, but what? Fuel's gonna be tight. These birds drink a lot of juice and the facility's at the edge of our range. If we divert to help any other survivors... I looked at Sarah. Her face was streaked with blood and soot, but her eyes were hard. She nodded slightly. We both knew what had to be done. Lead the way, Pete. We're with you. As we gained altitude, I could see other fires burning in the distance. Villages, outposts, perhaps even larger cities. The infection was spreading faster than anyone could have predicted. The sun would be rising soon, but the coming dawn promised no relief from the nightmare. Chen's voice was tight with pain. Jack, my arm. I don't know how much longer I can fly. I moved to the cockpit and put a hand on his shoulder. Just stay with us a little longer, brother. We're not dead yet. The mountains loomed ahead, their peaks still shrouded in darkness. Somewhere up there was supposedly safety, but I'd learned the hard way that supposedly could get you killed. We had maybe 2 hours of fuel, a wounded pilot, minimal ammunition, and no guarantee that what waited for us in the mountains was any better than what we'd left behind. The radio crackled again. Sierra 1, we've got multiple aircraft contacts approaching from the south. No IFF, no response to hails. I tightened my grip on the mounted gun. The night wasn't over yet. The approaching aircraft emerged from the pre-dawn darkness. 3 Black Hawks and a Chinook, all flying erratically. As they drew closer, I could see why. Their sides were riddled with bullet holes, and the Chinook's rear ramp was down, a body hanging half out of it. "Those aren't friendlies," Pete's voice was grim. "They're carrying infected." I watched in horror as another body tumbled from the Chinook, plummeting into the darkness below. The infected were literally falling out of the sky now. "They'll follow us to the facility," Sarah said, readying her weapon. "We can't lead them there." She was right. If those aircraft reached the mountain facility, any hope of a safe haven would be lost. I made the call. "Archangel Flight, we need to take them down." "Copy that," Pete responded, "but make it quick. Fuel's critical." The Apaches banked hard, their 30mm cannons roaring to life. The first Black Hawk erupted in flames, spinning into the side of a mountain. The second tried to evade but caught a burst through the cockpit. It dropped like a stone. The third Black Hawk pulled up sharply, attempting to ram Pete's Apache. He rolled at the last second, and his wingman's missiles turned the hostile helicopter into a fireball. But the Chinook was still coming, and it was headed straight for us. "Chen, hard right," I shouted, swinging the mounted gun around. The twin-rotor helicopter was a bigger target, but it was also more resilient. My rounds sparked off its armored hull as it bore down on us. "Jack," Chen's voice was strained. "I can't. My arm." The Black Hawk's controls slipped in his weakening grip. We started to lose altitude.
Sarah pushed past me into the cockpit. "Move over, Chen. Jack, get him out of there."
I pulled Chen from the pilot's seat as Sarah took control. She'd had basic flight training, we all had, but this was going to be close. The Chinook was right on top of us now, its infected crew visible through the cockpit glass, their movements jerky and inhuman. "Pete, we need that thing off our tail." "Negative, Sierra 1, Winchester on ordnance. You're going to have to deal with this yourself." Sarah brought us around in a tight turn, skirting the edge of a cliff. The Chinook followed, but its larger size made it slower to maneuver. That's when I saw our chance. "Sarah, see that cave entrance?" "You're insane," she said, but she was already adjusting our course. "Pete, hang back. This is going to get messy." Our Black Hawk shot into the cave mouth with meters to spare. The Chinook followed and wedged itself in the opening. Its rotors screamed as they struck rock, shearing off in a shower of sparks. The craft's momentum carried it forward until it stuck fast, sealing the cave behind us. Sarah powered through the darkness, using the Black Hawk's landing lights to navigate the tunnel. It was a natural cavern, and it was getting wider. Up ahead, I could see light. We burst out of the mountain into brilliant sunshine. The facility was below us, a fortified installation built into the mountainside. Armed personnel were already moving on the landing pad, and I could see the distinctive shapes of anti-aircraft batteries tracking us. "Sierra 1, this is Mountain Base Actual. You've got about 30 seconds to identify yourself before we light you up." I grabbed the radio. "This is Captain Jack Morrison, U.S. Special Forces. Authorization code Sierra Echo 79 Victor. We've got wounded aboard and we're running on fumes." A tense moment passed. "Authorization confirmed. Welcome to Thunder Mountain, Captain. You made it just in time. We're sealing the blast doors in 10 minutes. Nothing gets in or out after that." We set down hard on the landing pad. Medical teams rushed to help Chen as security forces secured the perimeter. Pete's Apache landed beside us, its fuel warning lights flashing red. Sarah turned to me, her hands shaking slightly on the controls. "Think this place will hold?" I looked at the massive blast doors, the automated defenses, the organized military presence. It was more than we'd had at Firebase Echo, but I'd learned not to count on anything in the past 12 hours. "It'll hold," I said, checking my watch. Exactly 12 hours had passed since I'd first heard Marcus's scream in that village. But even if it doesn't, we'll handle it. We survived the night. That's more than most can say. Sarah nodded, her expression grim but determined. So what now? I watched as the blast doors began to close, sealing us off from the horror outside. The sun was fully up now, casting long shadows across the mountain peaks. Somewhere out there, the world we knew was dying, but in here, humanity still had a chance. Now we rest, rebuild, and get ready, because sooner or later, we're going to have to take our world back. The blast doors sealed with a final, resonant boom. The first night of the apocalypse was over, but the real war was just beginning.
Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed that story as much as I did. Come back next time for some more scary stories. And as always, remember to face your fears.